necessitates which.
Feels easier to talk in a
Yeah, the ones that push out a little bit more.
Okay, all set.
Hey Maya, hey Ananda, hey Nikki.
We are recording. We are also live on YouTube whenever Chris is ready to call to order.
All right, well, Sabian is not here, but we will start. Sabian kind of showed up and disappeared. So I will call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the November 8th meeting of the Operations Work Group. We will begin with public input. We received several written statements from the public today. 3 written statements were submitted, 2 in support of the idea of renaming Stevens Elementary School to Darlene M. Hancock Elementary School, and also in support of the work of the Citizens Renaming Committee, as well as the recommendation to rename James Madison Memorial High School to Val Phillips Memorial High School. The 3rd comment was in support of Darlene M. Hancock as the Stevens Elementary School principal, and we also received additional suggestions as the MMSD considers future renaming committees, all of which can be viewed and read in full in board docs. We have some speakers registered. Barb, how many do we have at this point?
We have 3, and the first speaker is Ashley Brown. I will let her in.
Thank you, Barb.
Hey, Barbie, if you can also let Nichelle Smith, the Food Service Director.
Yep, I have done so. Thank you. Ashley, whenever you are ready.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. I won't be joining by video today, unfortunately. I am traveling and I am out of the country at the moment, but thank you for the opportunity. So to chairperson and members of the operations work group, my name is Ashley Brown and I am a proud alum of the Madison Metropolitan School District. I am a former student and graduate of Glenn W. Stevens Elementary, Thomas Jefferson Middle, and James Madison Memorial High Schools. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. On October 14th, I spoke on the proposal to rename James Madison Memorial High School with the Citizens Ad Hoc Committee. In my remarks, I reflected on the legacies of my elementary school principal, Darlene M. Hancock, and my high school principal, Bruce Dahman. I shared thoughts on the committee's process, underscoring my concerns over integrity. I also encourage the committee to face the fact that out of 50 schools district-wide, nearly 35 schools are named after men, only 5 are named after women. I noted the importance of recognizing local educators, disagreeing with the notion that former administrators should not be memorialized on school buildings. In the end, I urged the committee to advance Darlene M. Hancock Memorial High School, honoring the district's first Black woman principal. By way of a student-led petition, we are reminded that the figures and names that are displayed on schools matter. I encourage the district to consider the histories connected to the names of all schools and how they came to be. If the district were to undertake a second renaming process, it is my strong recommendation that it begin with Glenn W. Stevens Elementary School. At the October 27th Citizens Ad Hoc Committee meeting, committee member Mark Clear shared the history behind the naming of Stevens Elementary School and the conflict with interests involved with the decision-making authority at the time. I join in support of Mr. Clear's recommendation to rename Stevens Elementary School to Darlene M. Hancock Elementary School. The stories of educators should be told so students may come to know the significance to the school and the community at large. While my first choice for the renaming of Memorial High School was not selected, I am thrilled to share in the excitement and lend my full support for the recommendation that is before you today. I would like to acknowledge the work of Chairperson Jillian Walters and all the members of the Citizens Ad Hoc Committee. I recognize this task was not easy. I appreciate their thoughtful deliberation on this proposal. As a Black woman with a career in public policy and government relations, I would be honored to see Val Phillips Memorial High School proceed as a final recommendation to the Board of Education. Thank you.
Ashley, appreciate your comments. Barb, who's our next speaker?
Sorry, Brenda, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Barb.
Hello, Brenda. We just need you to turn on your mic and your video if you can, please. We're ready for your statement.
Oh, now I can unmute it and be
Hello,
seen.
Brenda. We just need you to turn on your mic and your video if you can, please. We're ready for your
Okay.
statement.
It appears to be on. Can people hear me?
We see you. Yes, we see and hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great, fantastic. Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Brenda Brown, and I'm here to tell you about Darlene Hancock, who she was in her multiple roles in the Madison community. I'm speaking to you now. I can unmute it and be
Hello,
seen.
Brenda. We just need you to turn on your mic and your video if you can, please. We're ready for your
Okay.
statement.
It appears to be on. Can people hear me?
We see you. Yes, we see you.
Okay, great,
I
fantastic.
think if you turn the YouTube off.
Right.
Okay, that did, is that okay?
There, that's much better. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so very much. Good evening, my name is Brenda Brown, and I'm here to tell you about who Darlene Hancock was in her multiple roles here in the Madison community. I'm speaking to you today as a parent who had 3 children that attended Glenn Stevens for their elementary education, and as an administrator who can recognize a high-performance agency. As a parent, I was delighted that our family was part of the Glenn Stevens community. Ms. Hancock's leadership created an environment that was welcoming and inclusive of everyone. She saw parents as an integral part of the school's team and treated us as such. In fact, she launched us forward. It was a joy just to walk into the school on the first day or to just be on the school grounds. Parents knew that the year would be full of exciting programs and that our children would get an excellent education. On the first day of school, the children would go to their classes and parents would participate in a parent coffee on school grounds. Everyone would bring their own coffee and meet and talk about the new school year. Ms. Hancock would come out and join us, and no one would ever really want to leave and go back to work or home because it was such an exciting environment. Glenn Stevens was known for numerous after-school musicals, plays, activities, and every parent, teacher, and student brought all of their skills and compassion that made these events exciting for everyone. It was really like being in the most exciting place, whether it's Disney World, whatever you think, that's what it was like at Glenn Stevens. Several parents, including myself, were asked to assist students fortunate to find out their needs and to work to help meet those needs. As an example, Ms. Hancock talked to the parents out of the Allied Draft community about the importance of attending parent-teacher meetings and conferences and how to speak when they would come to parent-teacher meetings in order to advocate for their children. Transportation was also sent to help empower these parents. Mrs. Hancock sought out and hired master teachers for Glenn Stevens and fought for resources for books and supplies for the school. Love sums up her leadership style, and her hope and plan for each student and faculty member was for them to succeed in their education and career. She was both strict and fair. The favorite statement said by Darlene all the time is, "You can come anytime to Miss Hancock's office, but you never want Miss Hancock to have to send for you." And she really meant that. Anyway, Miss Hancock set clear goals, effective leadership style. She provided a supportive environment, advocated for the needs of Glenn Stevens, made sure the environment was culturally responsive. Oh, gee. Culturally responsive to all students at Glenn Stevens, empowered teachers, special outreach to the allied draft community. She was fair, understanding. She at heart wanted the children. I apologize for the ringing phone, but what I want you to know is that Darlene's mission in life was to educate children and to do that in a way that was equitable for all. She fulfilled that mission here in Madison, Wisconsin. Given all of her accomplishments, she's a person that bloomed where she was planted. She is more than deserving to have a school named after her because she affected many lives, and I call a lot of parents who had input on this. So thank you for hearing me this evening.
Thank you, Brenda.
Okay. Our final speaker is Emily Hill Foster. Sorry, Emily Foster Hill, I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for your time. My name is Emily Foster Hill, and I'm the primary author of the proposal initially submitted to the Madison Metropolitan School District in April 2021 in support of renaming my alma mater, James Madison Memorial High School, to Darlene M. Hancock Memorial High School. Following speaking during the October 14th public hearing, I'm bringing my voice back into the room to affirm and support the Ad Hoc Citizens Committee's historic motion to rename JMM to Val Phillips Memorial High School during their October 27th meeting. As we all move forward, I'm also bringing my voice back into the room in order to share a few observations, questions, and needed corrections as MMSD moves into considering future renaming committees. First of all, I want to acknowledge my privilege of access to take part in as well as observe this process. As an experienced facilitator of process observation, I'm concerned about the Ad Hoc Citizen Committee's inequitable makeup. If the intent was to rename an educational institution that currently honors a racist historical figure, it was surprising to not see an effort made to intentionally include Black administrators, educators, as well as a Black student representative from JMM's Black Student Union. Likewise, as we know, the vote wasn't unanimous on the 27th, since one member chose to vote not for Memorial High School, as depicted in the Wisconsin State Journal, but for Madison Memorial High School. Moving forward, I encourage MMSD to authentically center the voices currently missing from this conversation. Moving forward, how will MMSD adapt the voting processes utilized by these committees so that they are followed clearly by the committee, as well as remain transparent to the public? And moving forward, how will MMSD ameliorate accessibility for future public participation? On the 14th, and actually also for tonight, the sign-up link was not working on all platforms very easily. I was only able to sign up to speak through my smartphone at the last minute last time and was sent a link through somebody else this evening. This limits the general public's ability to participate readily. Moving forward, what protections will be put in place for student members of MMSD's committees? During the 1027 meeting, the student member kind of voiced vague accusations that could lead to serious personal ramifications for them. Darlene M. Hancock served MMSD for 20 years as the first Black female principal within a system where she had to consistently fight hard for the educational opportunities and financial resources for Black students that did not and still do not have the same systemic privilege as white students. Fully aware of this as the principal at Glenn W. Stevens, Darlene M. Hancock cultivated family involvement and immersed her staff in hands-on professional development involving Black history. So for the record, during the October 27th meeting, Darlene M. Hancock's professional record within MMSD was misquoted. As provided for the Ad Hoc Citizen Committee in our April 2021 proposal to MMSD, Darlene M. Hancock began her 20 years with MMSD as a grade level principal at James Madison Memorial High School. She later became assistant principal at Lincoln Middle School, followed by 10th grade principal at East High School. In 1983, she became principal at Glenn W. Stevens Elementary School, where she served until her retirement from MMSD in 1995. Lastly, moving forward, I am grateful for the opportunity to participate once more today. The consideration of a renaming committee for Glenn W. Stevens Elementary arose during the October 27th meeting. And at this time, I would like to bring forth the recommendation to MMSD of renaming Glenn W. Stevens Elementary School to Darlene M. Hancock Elementary School. Thank you again for your time and take care.
Thank you, Emily. All right, that concludes the public input portion of our meeting tonight, and we'll move on to the approval of minutes. I move to approve the minutes from the Operations Work Group meeting dated May 10th, 2021. Give it a second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, well, before we launch into tonight's agenda, I just want to set the stage by reminding everyone that this is our last operations work group meeting before January. December is a short month and we don't have an operations work group meeting on the calendar. So this is our last meeting before we dive into the budget process for the coming school year. And most of the items we have on our agenda tonight are intended to inform that process. Specifically, we are going to be talking about where we're headed with food service, and we're going to be having a conversation about enrollment and class size. The PowerPoint tonight is more specifically focused on enrollment, but we did receive a class size report, and we can bring class size into the conversation. These are both especially pertinent conversations as we look at where we're at with the state budget, as we're going to do in January, and just I think we need to appreciate now and continue to acknowledge that we're moving into an extremely difficult budget year. And we need to seriously consider the data that we're receiving now to help us make informed decisions with limited resources as we move into the new year. But before we do all that, we do have an agenda item that we will be deciding on at the end of the month at our regular meeting. And that is the renaming of Memorial High School. Julian Walters, I believe, is here to give us an oral update on the committee's recommendations for renaming Memorial, and then we will have an opportunity to ask clarifying questions or anything we want to know about the committee's process. Now is the time to get those kind of clarifications and that information. So before we launch into Julian's presentation, Dr. Jenkins, did you want to add anything?
Yes. Can you hear me now, everyone? I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to Mr. Walters. Very fine job with the committee and your leadership there. And we really do appreciate it anytime our alumni, our community get involved in any process and it leads out to a very positive result. And everything that I've heard has been really positive in terms of the way that you're ensuring that all voices were being heard throughout the process. So I can't thank you enough. As superintendent of Madison Metropolitan School District, and also to Chris's point about the agendas tonight, the items on the agenda tonight. We are trying to look forward and knowing earlier that Ross presented us with a forecast of what next year could look like. So we're beginning already to think about the work that we're going to pick up in January. So in closing, again, just thank you, Mr. Walters, for a very, very fine job, and thank you to the entire committee.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Walters, would you like to take the floor?
Yes, thank you for those kind words, Superintendent Jenkins. I appreciate it. I'm thankful to be here with you all today. My name is Julian Walters. I was privileged with the opportunity to chair the Citizens Ad Hoc Renaming Committee for James Madison Memorial. I think the best way to kind of kick things off is to kind of just walk you guys through the process to explain how we got to where we got. It's been a very eventful five or so months. Things have changed and there's been some emotion drawn into it from not only the committee members, but the community. And there's been comments and articles and things that have come out that we've addressed and discussed. So it's been very fun. It's been an experience that I always remember. So while you guys are thanking me, I'd like to thank you guys for being selected and chosen to be chair. I always remember this experience. But with that being said, we started off just going over the submissions. We saw the submissions that were from the website, and Barb and Dr. Pryor did such a great job in making sure we had everything at our disposal to kind of navigate this process. So with the early submittals, we put those through a rubric, and we ranked them based on how thoroughly they were executed in regards to the rubric. And from that, we were able to come up with an average of 3. 3 or better moved forward in the process. Anything below, we kind of eliminated. So that consolidated our list. That was more of a technical, analytical thing. That wasn't anything that had any real input from the committee at that point. It was just something that we used to kind of shorten our list based on how people followed the criteria of the rubric. When we got to that step, we saw that there were some names that were closely aligned, some things that were, that generally people could say these are the same names or things in that regard. But the committee was very diligent in keeping things separate, making sure that, things like Madison Memorial and Memorial High School didn't have the same merit, that they were indeed separate things and their own separate submissions. And we ruled those as such. But then later in the process, it was motioned and approved that regardless to what the name was, Memorial High School will always stick to the end of it. And so when that happened, again, that eliminated some other names. And we once were again able to consolidate our list to a smaller list from that initial submission list. I believe it was 15. It was 15 names, 10 or 15. I don't know the exact number at this moment, but when we got to that number, we used a tool called Rank Choice, which was brought to us by Mark Clear. Basically, it's a tool where each person ranks the list, and then it breaks down the different numbers based on once you remove the first choice, and then how many votes were garnered for the second choice. And as you remove names, which names would then move to the top. And that's how we got our names down to the 4. Before, actually, I continue with that, the 4 that we had brought forth to the public hearing were not the 4 that ranked choice the best. Again, this is where we got more deliberate in our intent. And so at this juncture, we had a decision to make, and we decided that Bruce Diamond deserved to be in that 4 that we brought forth towards to the public hearing, because he had received so much public support. And we wanted to make sure that that wasn't overlooked. We wanted to make sure that we were hearing the public's voice. And if we count the comments for any name that was submitted, he by far had the most. If we count the positive comments that we have for any name, he by far had the most. So after discussing, we thought that that was a name that we should move forward, and we did want to make progress. So instead of adding that in addition, we replaced a name with Bruce Diamond, which I was happy about, because it kind of showed that we weren't all analytical and technical. If that was the case, we could have created an app or something and just ran the names through that. But we wanted to have more of a humanistic influence. And so that's how that came about. I know that was something that was expressed because everything was on board docs and people were able to see that that wasn't a name that ranked high, but I wanted to kind of elaborate on that and how his name ended up in that final four, or that four that was presented and spoke on during the public hearing. After the public hearing, after hearing some words from some community members, we decided to take some more time to kind of re-look over the merit of each name, especially the individuals who were actually people, and think about how we were going to come to the next meeting with the intent to select a name to put forward towards the school board. We didn't know at that time it would be 1, 2, 3, or 4. But that led us into that last meeting on October 27th, where we got to Vel Phillips. During that meeting, we had voted on Memorial High School, and it failed in favor of 6-5 against it. And that led to more discussion and things amongst the committee. And as you guys know, it was then approved that we move forward just Vel Phillips Memorial High School solely on a 10-1 vote. And so that's just a high level kind of overview of how we got to where we got. There was a lot more discussion involved. There was resources that we had in regards to every submission and people and articles and things on board docs that we were able to use to, not only check out the merit, but learn more about each individual and how deserving they may be to have the distinct honor of having a name, a high school named after them. And so here we are, November 8th, and we have came to the decision of putting forth, Vel Phillips Memorial High School. And, with that being said, I'm here to answer any questions or provide any clarity if the group may have some. But again, I thank you guys for your time. Thank you guys for allowing us to do this. And I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. I will open this up for questions, and Ollie, why don't you go first?
I'm curious. I'm sorry. I forgot that we don't unmute. I'm curious about what it looked like to include the students at Memorial in this process, and what you heard specifically from young people who engaged in the committee meetings.
So we had a committee member, Eliana Sour. Eliana, she did a really good job of being the voice for the students. I personally didn't have that connection, so it was very beneficial to have someone on the committee who was actually in the hallways. Very early in the process, she voiced her concern with the lack of communication going out to JMM. And in particular, she was saying that there hadn't been any communications that were being sent to students nor the families that were clear on about what was going on. And so when she brought that to the committee, Barb and worked with the school to send out an email that kind of let people know about what was going on in regards to Memorial, and kind of spread the word as best we could, on top of the news outlets and things that were sharing updates as we progressed in this decision. I found it very, very beneficial to have her voice. And, you know, personally, as I did with as I intended to do with every member on the committee, I want to make sure everyone's perspective, everyone's situation was heard. And I think she did a really good job of voicing her opinions, not only as a student, but as a future alumni. And she brought insight that was very valuable to our community and to our committee.
Thank you. I also want to say that as young people have reached out to me, I have been really impressed with the analysis our students have of why it's important to change this name and the impact it has on young people to enter a school that's named after a person who owned other human beings. And I think one of the things that I've been really impressed with is our students' sense of the history as it pertains to James Madison. And so, you know, I've learned a lot from our young people, and I've been really impressed with the educators at Memorial who have been engaging their students in this conversation and helping their students to be equipped with an analysis that really allows for them to examine some really complex and ethically intense issues, including, you know, the fact that James Madison Memorial contributed to the 3/5 clause within the Constitution and details of that nature. So I greatly appreciate all the work that you've done and all the work that the Memorial community has done in preparation for this conversation this evening.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And before the next question, I think it's a good time to also kind of, to those sentiments, you know, speak on some of the staff and faculty who were on the committee who also did a very good job of kind of expressing what they were hearing from their students and people they engaged with. Lynn Mormino was on the committee, Amber Jansen, and Rosemary Barrientos are all people who work in those hallways who, like Eliana, were having discussions with people, having discussion with teachers, students, admin, principals, and we're bringing those discussions and those insights back to the committee. Some things were, you know, harder to hear, but it was the truth and it was necessary. And so, you know, I would like to thank those people. Kind of as you said, Allie, those, you know, I know these past couple months probably were a little different times than probably any other as someone a part of the committee and someone who is working during a time of a renaming of a high school. And they did a really good job making sure that, you know, and providing unbiased insight, but also speaking on behalf of the people they interact with on a daily basis at Memorial.
Thanks, Ollie. Are there other comments, questions? Thank you. I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yes. Ollie, I appreciate what you said. May I make one correction for the record? James Madison did vote and own slaves. James Madison Memorial High School did not. And unfortunately, what you did say was that the Memorial High School was part of the 3/5 compromise, and I just wanted to make that clear. That's how it came over my mic. But I want to elevate your comments because I think they are probably the most important of them, because student voice is what I was worried about. I was the one who suggested Eliana be on the committee, but I know I'm not the only one. I think there were 3 others who suggested her, I think. All I know is I want our committees next time to have at least 2 student representatives, because these are their schools. They're not my schools. They're not any schools. They're their schools that belong to these students in this district. It should celebrate the values that the students hold, not the values of the past, not the values of the future, the values of what the students hold and and our students have been very clear on wanting an anti-racist agenda. And they've been very, very clear on it. So I think we need to listen to our students and make sure that at least 2 are involved on a committee the next time. By the way, great job, Julian. I watched a lot of the meetings.
Savian, did I see your hand?
Yeah, but I'm after Ananda.
After Ananda? Okay, Ananda, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Board Member Carusi. Thank you so much, Julian, for all your work. It can get really intense, this type of work, and you got a little bit of that, so really appreciate. I also was really inspired by the way you did your report, to just be, to just walk through like a transparency, because I think there were moments where people weren't sure what was happening. I know I had got a lot of questions where folks weren't sure what was going on and what was going to happen. And I think that there was definitely some anxiety about what was going to happen next. So I really appreciate you walking us through the timeline, and also, the course corrections throughout the time. I wanted to share a deep gratitude to all the members of the committee that helped us get to where we are today. I also want to say thank you so much to Barb Osborne, who is a phenomenal person, and without her, I think our lives would have been like 10 times harder. She makes everything seems very easy, but we know it's not, and she's making everything possible for even for us to be here and be on YouTube and having this meeting. So I really appreciate Barb and all the folks that there were a lot of engagement throughout this process, and I think that's such an amazing thing, and something that Madison should be proud of, and how engaged we all are. I really also appreciate the fact that we were able to be in places of disagreement, and that's something that we can use more of those opportunities where that we have to come up with consensus at times, even when we don't agree. Lastly, I wanted to say to share also gratitude for the administration. I think this is probably one of the times where we've seen so much energy around changing of school names. And I don't remember seeing so much energy, and so much support for that to happen from the community, but also from administration. So I want to share my sincere gratitude to also for the process, and to my colleagues, and to the entire team, to make sure that this process of renaming is being accessible to folks. So thank you so much, and back to you, Board Member Carusi. Thank you.
Thanks. Savian?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to give my sincere thanks to Julian for chairing this committee. I think in some ways we've been talking about this since we were in high school too. I definitely know that this was a topic of conversation when we were students here, and the fact that we were able to act on a proposal from a student at the time means a lot as well. We want to talk about centering students' voices, and what this means to just correct the historical record that we should not commemorate people who would have us in chains today. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to taking action on this at our board meeting.
Thanks, Savian. Chris?
Thanks, Chris. And again, I want to echo the thanks to Julian for chairing the committee, and the members of the committee who put the work in to get this proposal to us. What I've seen through the process is thoughtful deliberation, and I really do appreciate the time and the effort the committee members dedicated to doing this. And I also want to thank everyone who took the time to submit proposals and share their feedback on the options that were being considered. I personally want to hear from as many people as possible even now as this process continues. From the beginning, I urged us to reach out and communicate about the process, as I hoped this process would be done with the memorial community and not to the memorial community. And what I learned, I think, is that our board policy 6700 isn't really set up that way. Especially it doesn't differentiate for how to do this at the high school level, and we've never done this at the high school level. So I guess a question that I have for Julian, and I kind of watched you grapple with this as you were deliberating with the committee. Does this recommendation have consensus within the larger memorial community? And what outreach, do you think we've done enough outreach? Like, how do we know that we're there, I guess? And the reason that I ask that is, again, I don't think the policy makes this a clear directive to the committee as part of your process. And I'm not suggesting that you all didn't follow all the necessary steps. Because again, I watched you grapple with some of these same questions as you deliberated. I'm just trying to figure out, in addition to having one student member who was sort of gathering feedback on her own from students she knew, and, staff members gathering their own feedback, are there additional ways to gather feedback or have a dialogue with the memorial school community as this is moving forward in the next 2 weeks, beyond just like forms on the district website?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, on top of renaming a school, we were also renaming a school in the middle of a pandemic. So there were some other barriers that we were having to work with that probably in normalcy we wouldn't have had to face. I think that for the most part, we did the best we could, but I do think that there was other ways we could have outreached. Now, in terms of doing it safely and following guidelines and things like that, that would take more thought behind. But as you alluded, the committee definitely was having dialogue and kind of trying to find ways to extend the reach so that we could hear more from that community. I think her name was Emily. She spoke at the public hearing tonight. Pardon me if I messed up that name, but she brought up a point that we talked about a lot. And she actually had access to participate. She had those resources. I know there's a lot of people in that memorial community who come from marginalized communities and may not have had the bandwidth or the access to participate or listen in the community committee meetings or show up to public hearings virtually and things like that. And so those were things that we tried to do our best to account for in its absence, because there were a lot of people from those communities who weren't able to voice their their opinions. And I personally took into account those shortcomings and tried to do the best I could to kind of reach out and to hear people from my community and the community I grew up in and people I grew up with outside of Memorial and inside of Memorial to kind of lessen that blow, so to speak. Now moving forward, we got 2 weeks, November 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know what the protocol is or what things we can do and cannot do. I'm just loosely speaking here. But maybe if there was something held at Memorial prior to where families can speak or things like that, maybe in person, or host something where they can come there and meet virtually. I don't know, but I just know that had we not been faced with this pandemic and been doing these in person, I know for sure more people would have spoke at the public hearing and there would have been more direct community involvement versus, each of us committee members taking up, our own individual responsibility and reaching out to people and bringing it back to the group. So I hope that answers your question, but that's kind of what we did. And we were faced with some of those challenges, but we tried our best to combat that given the state of the world.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Julian. And again, I know that the committee did an amazing job of trying to do that outreach within the parameters with which they were working. I guess, my question going forward, and also, I guess I would like to sort of commend you for the process that you went through in deliberating and debating also. One of my other questions, we can get back to the participation one, but one of my other questions is there a way that the committee can provide like a written summary? Like you just gave us a verbal summary tonight of the process you went through and how you came to your conclusions. I think that would be really helpful for people to be able to go to a website and say, okay, I get it. I see how they went through that process and here's the conclusion they came to. I don't know, Dr. Pryor, if that's something that we would be able to help the committee come up with. Because I think just it's really valuable for Julian to share the committee process like that. And as we know, not everybody is going to watch a meeting on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the, that's something I'd be open to. I think the committee members would be open to that as well. I think that's actually something, it's good, it provides structure and a template for people to go back to and kind of, read high level and understand where we got. So, I think that, Barb, Dr. Pryor and I, we connect offline. We want to talk about it right now, how that looks. I think, that's a great idea.
Okay, thanks. And then back to the participation, I guess if there is some way to engage the students and staff at Memorial over the next 2 weeks. So it's not just an after hours public, hearing or our meeting that we have on the 22nd. And then, yeah, if there's some way to do that, and just to let the public know that the form for comments is still available on the MMSD website. That's correct, right?
Right. And if you don't mind, Ms. Gorman-Smith, I just wanted to just reiterate once again, in the committee's effort to garner more input and participation from community, all of the platforms were available to them. And I think even to this date, we had over 700 responses that was captured there in the space. And I just have to say this, that I don't think I have ever seen a more cross-functional team or committee there. We had teacher, we had counselor, we had parents, we had community members, we had a student on the committee. And I just have to say this, that the way the committee challenged each other, the way the committee started out, and to see how it evolved and really transformed over this 5-month period, it was just something less than magical to see how they worked together. It was very respectful, collaborative, and a lot of passion was exhibited on the during these meetings. And but the level of respect that was extended to each other was just something to watch. And I would just encourage everyone to just go back and just watch the process. All of it was captured on YouTube. And if you see how they held each other accountable, I don't think, as Mr. Walter said earlier, in regards to policy 6700, it was textbook all the way. And, they did not allow one individual to get away with anything. They held each other accountable and constantly went back to what is our core work? What are we charged to do? And so again, I just want to publicly thank Julian for his leadership and that entire committee, to see how they were just open. They ventured it with an open mindset. And I just think it's a lot to learn from just watching that. And I just encourage you to go back and watch it, because we can all learn a lot from how they really progressed and how they conducted themselves over 5-month period. So I just wanted to interject that.
I will agree with you, Dr. Pryor, and echo that. I just want to say that the observation of respectful deliberation in a public atmosphere these days, an excellent example of that. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Maya, did I see your hand up?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions before we move on to our next agenda item? All right, well, Mr. Walters, once again, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for this presentation. We really appreciate your work on this process, and we look forward to meeting with you again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for the kind words that you guys expressed to me and the committee. It was a privilege. And yeah, virtually or in person, I'll see you guys November 22nd. You guys have a good evening.
All right, our next agenda item is the food and nutrition vision and direction. This will be presented by Mr. Cedric Hodo. And Mr. Hodo, why don't you take the floor?
All right, thank you. Thank you, Board Member Carusi. Barb, do you mind sharing the screen at all, or?
Coming right up, coming right up.
If you want to control that, and we'll tell you next if you want to go that way.
Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes, Barb.
Okay.
All right,
ready to
thank
go.
you.
Thank you,
Gotcha.
Cedric.
All right, thank you, Barb. All right, well, good evening. On behalf of the 150 plus food service workers across the district, we would like to thank the MMSD Board of Education and Dr. Jenkins for the privilege of serving as leaders of your food nutrition program. With me today are select members of our management team. They are as follows: Nichelle Smith, Director of Food Nutrition; Melvin Price, Assistant Director of Food Nutrition; and Maggie Sana, our registered dietitian. Team, do you mind giving the board a virtual wave if you don't mind? Give me a second to come on camera. Thanks a lot. Tonight's presentation is entitled The Evolution of Food Service. Our team will highlight some historical successes while also sharing our strategy on how we can build a promising future together, leaning forward with excellence, equity, humanity, and intentionality. I'll turn it over to Melvin. Melvin.
Thank you, Cedric. Everything that we do is anchored in our core values. It's our goal to make sure that our collective food strategy embraces and is anchored in our goals. In particular, goal number 2, which states, every school is a place where children, staff, and families thrive. Studies have shown that diet and nutrition plays an important factor in educational outcomes. Historically, food is the connecting point that joins all families. The question is, can school food service also be that connecting point that creates a thriving environment? And we believe it absolutely can. Next slide.
Thank you, Melvin. Over the years, MMSD Food and Nutrition Services has taken us step by step toward improving all aspects of our service. Kudos to the former Steve Youngbauer and Chad Weezy for their hard work and dedication. As we reflect back, we see an abundance of fresh fruit and vegetable options, local purchasing, and greater awareness around the need to provide healthier food choices. As we continue to evolve in MMSD, we look forward to enhancing and expanding our existing culinary program by adding innovative engagement opportunities like the Scholar Chef Competition, the Battle of the Best Culinary Showcase diverse K-12 compliant recipes, and not to mention the icing on the cake. Everyone knows the mascot Bucky the Badger at UW-Madison. Well, picture MMSD having their very own nutritional mascot partnering with Bucky the Badger for health and wellness purposes. A district-wide mascot naming costume competition using our very own scholars to design and name the mascot. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you, Nichelle. Some of our current best practices we are proud of are as follows. Fresh purchases from local farmers, up 9% and growing. The REAP Farm to School program, 14 schools participating in the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Grant. School gardens and cooking classes are an opportunity to provide hands-on learning in urban ag and farm to plate preparation. MMSD chefs prepare food at the Food Production Center. Garden bars throughout the district to offer students choices for fruits and vegetables and to introduce new food items while reducing food waste. High school kitchens produce the majority of the menu items on site for same-day service. And the wellness policy has allowed for longer lunches. However, updates to the wellness policy are forthcoming. Before we begin to dive into our 4 key strategies, we'll pause for a moment of reflection.
And Chris will pause here. I'll turn it over to Board Member Carusi if we want to, any questions before we head into our next 4 key strategies, which is the meat of our presentation. Board Member Carusi.
Are there any clarification questions at this point? Ollie.
Yeah, so I'm just curious in terms of the partnerships that are being showcased. Will we actually hear from those partners in terms of what those relationships look like? How are we leveraging those partnerships or expanding those partnerships to give greater access to food, nutrition, and give our students kind of those enriching experience in which they get to grow their own food, cultivate their own food, and ultimately create their own food?
Yes, board member Ali, absolutely. And deeper in our presentation where food is part of our overall educational strategy, we'll go a little bit deeper into that if you give us just a moment. But to your answer, absolutely, yes, we will do that for you.
Cedric, just curious, can you be a little more specific in terms of will we actually hear from the partners this evening, or how are their voices incorporated in the presentation?
We would not be hearing from the specific groups today. These were already established relationships. Maggie, if you want to talk about any established relationships that we already have in place, and then we'll also provide for you, to our board members, what we're exactly doing with them. Maggie.
Yeah, so we're currently in a 2-year USDA Farm to School grant that we've partnered with REAP Food Group and UW-CIAS to implement a Harvest of the Month program. So we are in development with that program right now, working primarily with REAP and CIAS. I think that's the biggest form of our partnerships right now.
That's all right.
Mr. Hodo, I have a clarifying question about the garden bars and the longer lunches, which were spelled out in the wellness policy. And I'm just wondering how COVID has impacted our ability to do and where we're headed.
Yep, absolutely. Great question. Board Member Cruzy. Nichelle, if you want to share with the board member, please, what we're doing right now during the midst of COVID in regards to our garden bars.
So right now we have been starting with DOD to get more fresh fruit and vegetable options during this COVID setback. So we just started, kind of like making menu options available as far as creating menu options using more fresh fruit and vegetables to create more entrees. Right now, since we can't actually use a lot of the openness of the salad bars, we are still trying to be compliant and be more creative when it comes to offering more when it comes to fresh fruit and vegetables.
When it comes to just the duration of lunch, I've heard that the current model with lunch in the classrooms, particularly in classrooms where not everybody can eat at the same time because there's too many people in the room to maintain adequate spacing, has actually shortened lunch, actual time spent eating significantly. And I'm just wondering, are we going to go back to trying to get on track to our goal of having children have, I think, 30 minutes of seated time for lunch?
Absolutely. Yes, we are. Are we looking into that? Cedric, did you want to direct it? I'm sorry, I just answered the question. I didn't know if that was to me or I'm sorry.
No, that's no problem. Board Member Cruzy, to your point, yes. As you know, COVID has been a huge disruptor to our normal model. It is our plan to hopefully, if we're able to resume back to classroom dining, for cafeteria dining, that we incorporate this. In the meanwhile, our team has been pre-packaging fresh fruit, fresh vegetables individually and carrying them to the class as well. But ultimately, our goal is to return back to our garden bars, even if we have to walk the kids through, allow them to pick their choices and then continue walking to the class. There's multiple models that of which we can undertake, and it'll be a school-specific thing.
Thank you for that. And just to be clear, it's fine with me if the 30 seated minutes are in a classroom or in a cafeteria. I think the goal is just to get to 30 minutes for kids to eat. Eddie, I see your hand.
I'm trying to, there I go. We're hearing, thank you, Mr. Hodo, for addressing these issues. Also, we're hearing a lot on people saying that they're running out of food or kids are going hungry? And how did that start? And how could we resolve it if you know?
Nikki, can I jump in there because there's a whole lot more presentation coming. Can we hold that until the end because that's a really important question and I think we need more context.
Got it.
Yeah, but thank you for raising that.
No problem.
Are there other clarifying questions on the information we've received so far? And if not, let's keep going. Thank you.
All right, next slide. We would like to share our top 4 key strategies we believe will enhance our overall food service program. They are as follows. Community engagement. How do we tie in and connect our community to our overall food service program? Human capital. What investments will we provide to our staff to support their learning and development as we advance our food service program? Number 3, infrastructure. What's needed to ensure long-range plans are established and what barriers do we need to overcome? And number 4, food and nutrition as an overall educational strategy. What will be the impact of improving our overall nutrition and educational standards by tying in food to curriculum? Let's take a deeper dive into the 4 strategies. Next slide. Community engagement as a key strategy is the number 1 factor in the evolution of our food service. Simply put, we need the community support to achieve our goals. Just as the referendum has supported our conditional spaces, we need the same support with the expansion of food service. Below are a few of our collaborative partnerships we have established. REAP, continued partnership with FFVP, showcasing educational opportunities with DPI and Mmsd through new recipes, environmental technology, farm to fresh manufacturing, and food truck enhancements. Sustained aim, partner with community-based organizations to develop awareness around sustainable programs, including waste reduction and recycling. No Child Hungry, working with organizations which focus on eradicating hunger. For example, the establishment of continued food pantry programs at select schools. GFPP, or Good Food Purchasing Program. Perhaps new to some members, our goal is to develop a coalition of community members who will support MMSD. Ideally, GFPP transform the way public institutions purchase food by creating a transparent and equitable food system built on 5 core values: local economy, health, valued workforce, animal welfare, and environmental sustainability. As you know, our wellness policy will be updated in 21-22. This is the perfect time to bring this up for discussion. And finally, Badger Rock and Rooted. Continue support and enhancement by strengthening our relationship with community gardens and volunteer learning. Next slide. Human capital investments or staff investments. Our next key strategy is human capital. What investments will be needed? Will we take a moment to invest in our own? As teachers need ongoing training and support, food service workers deserve the same level of care and attention. Below are some of the action items that will support our staff's growth and development. Pay rate analysis is one. Are we competitive with the market for seeking and retaining qualified candidates? According to Glassdoor, the average food service worker is paid around $27,342 annually. Benchmarking against the industry standard will allow us to focus on retaining and recruiting qualified talent. Let's look at the labor market. How do we adjust? What is the impact on the bottom line if we adjust wages? Performance evaluations. Our current system needs to be developed. This will include a baseline assessment of talent, enhancement of job descriptions, and standardized audits for compliance purposes. How do our principals fare? Our principal partnership report with on-site leadership will ensure our food nutrition staff are progressing at a sustainable pace. Optimizing labor, staffing levels. Adjust staffing levels to reflect the diverse needs of our student. Also cross-training when applicable with our staff. And the final 2, training and development. Upskills technical ability through ServSafe, Primero Edge, safety walks, and mandatory team training. Lastly, workforce strategies to support ongoing development will also be crucial. What about personal development days? Working with our Talent Development Center, we think we can achieve this. Next slide. That's the next slide, Barbara, if you can.
I did. Oh, here, sorry, financial view,
Infrastructure.
yes. I did
Okay.
update it. Is the Zoom link slow? I'm looking
Yeah.
at the infrastructure side right now.
Okay, I'm seeing human capital.
Barb, check to see if your Zoom is paused. Your Zoom sharing is paused. We're still seeing human capital.
Checking it out, sorry, it's pausing. I'm sorry, give me a couple minutes, I'm trying.
No worries.
No worries, Barb.
You got it.
That's great, because I just talked. That's a lot of kids. And they all walk. There's an Asian kid in King County. Yeah, they can be detained here for extradition.
So we were had.
Ollie,
Yes.
my camera is not working very well, so I'm trying to turn it on as well. But also, we can hear the conversation.
So thanks for letting me know. That's the new. What is that? That is our speaker. It's the new. That's alien. What is? That's crazy. That's cool. Wow. It's new. It's allegedly a speaker. It's definitely a speaker. That's not allegedly a speaker. Yes. That's what they tell us. It's allegedly. Let's have a little of that. What's the game? No, the game that is the Netflix show.
Oh, Squid Game.
It's got a little bit of a Squid Game vibe.
Board Member Carusi, I'm wondering if we want to just do a quick like 5 minutes break and then be back.
Looks like Barb's getting it up. Oh,
Haven't made progress yet, Chris. Okay, 5-minute recess, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
5 minutes, yep. Be back at 6:17.
Yeah. I was like, hey, don't talk about the jail for real, y'all.
Much more sensitive than that is, dude.
Yeah, no, that does not look like it's.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated.
Makes sense. Just streaming forever.
This thing.
A lot to say today.
I'm telling you.
I don't think they saw you. So rude. I was like, that could not have been on purpose. So rude. I feel like this is a harsh stopping place because we were just kind of getting into
Our stopping place.
into the real convo.
I think we're also still live on YouTube, so.
We are.
Yeah.
Thank you for.
I asked. Barb's having some. She's with Zoom.
So I can't get into Zoom. I can see it right here. Close all windows.
Chris, is this our last thing or do we have two?
We have one more thing after this.
Okay.
One more presentation.
What's the other presentation?
Enrollment and class size.
That's important.
It's important. Like, it's not going to be short. No.
I feel like there's a lot of like big items for tonight.
Yeah. There are.
But we seem to have had a good flow until right now. I was like, we're moving pretty quick. It's only 6:15.
We're doing pretty good. And then, yeah. What are you going to do? Sometimes technology fails us.
It's true. Hopefully it'll just we'll come back on. We'll get started.
Okay, Richard, can you go into the meeting in 103 and use the computer there? Okay, I'm gonna have to give you control of it because I can still see that it's open and I cannot access it on my. Okay, just go in there and I'll stay on the phone with you.
Dr. McGregor.
I don't know how to pull it up. Okay, so can you get into it? I want you to be able to share your screen. Are you able to manipulate it at all?
Trying to see how do I get
See enrollment.
okay, hold on. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Let me take it. Okay.
There's no screen, so I just have to.
Looks like I have screen sharing permissions. I'm not positive, but I could try.
I can see it. I can see it. I can't open it up anymore. Wow.
Can you do it, Chris? Try. Just have to figure out. My problem is I don't actually have the PowerPoint, so I would have to just show the.
Okay, Richard.
From
I need somebody there who can run it.
So,
I cannot pull this up. I cannot pull this up to save my.
well, if I have screen sharing
Yes, then you can pull up.
capabilities, I can run it from my office.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll do that.
I gotta shut this down. I can't do anything with it.
Okay. So I'll go right there now.
Okay.
Dr. Gregory, do you want me to stop sharing and you're gonna share?
Yes.
Okay.
We're gonna try.
All right, if it doesn't work, it looks like I can do it, so. Yeah, I think you had it. I've got screen sharing, but I don't have the power. Maybe I do have the PowerPoint file. I should look. Mr. Hodo may have sent it to me.
I gotta stop the transcription.
Chris, would it be in your board docs that you could download it and share it that way?
That's just a PowerPoint file. It's not the actual slideshow. But I may have, I think I actually have the slideshow unless it changed since this morning. All right, I've got the slideshow, Barb. I found it. So if you want me to run it, I can.
If not, let me know if you want me to try Board Member Carusi. I think I have access.
Yeah, no, you sent me the link this morning, so I got it. So if it doesn't work, Dr. McGregory, I can share.
Yes, because I just have the board doc slides, so that would help. Board Member Cruz.
If I share, I can share the actual slides. Yeah. I want to go to Zoom. I want to share my screen. And I want to go to. All right, is that working? Just get it to the right slide here. Okay. Can everybody see the infrastructure slide? Yes. All right, now we just need to make sure everybody's back. And let's see. Ananda and Maya, are you here?
No idea.
Yeah, I'm here, Chris.
Maya?
I have no idea what to do.
I'm here. My camera is just not working currently, so I'm trying to get it to work.
Okay.
All right.
I can't do this. Mr. Hodo, I think we're good.
You all set?
Just let me know when you want me to change the slide.
I will do. Thank you. Thank you so much, Board Member Carusi. Okay, let's continue on. I think we were on our third key strategy, which was infrastructure. Want to take a moment to go over infrastructure for you so you have an idea. Yep, stay on that. Yep, that one right there is fine. What infrastructure upgrades are needed to improve our food service? Below are some hurdles that we are facing. Simply put, we need some support. I would love to come back at a later date to help quantify some of the small upgrades that will allow us to move forward in a progressive manner. Here are some examples of some items. Main kitchen production. We're trying to overhaul an existing 25 and 35-year-old assembly line. Aging assembly lines simply does not support an efficient production. Financial investments. Analysis of our district's current cooking equipment to determine the progressive upgrades that aligns with the vision of scratch cooking. staffing level optimization. Are we staffed appropriately to provide upgrades to food service? And then full service preventive maintenance programs. Evaluating the life expectancy of our equipment. Currently, we do not have a defined plan nor strategy around those items. Last two, my recommendation is for a pilot program. Incremental investments into pilot schools or select schools to showcase the impact of how diet and nutrition can support an educational outcome. Next, I'll talk about a couple of things. Supply chain shortages, that's what you've been hearing about. With a global pandemic, it forces us to think differently about food service and the delivery models that we have currently. Let's take a look at the next slide to review a 10-year process. If you take a financial view of our district over the last 10 years, we will see that our current financial model simply will not support an infrastructure overhaul with food and nutrition alone. Our year-to-year profit does not trend in such a way that our food service can support the ongoing changes by itself. On a brighter note, our district one-time funding sources, if acted upon correctly and worked out with a plan, it could support modest upgrades to select schools based upon our equity model. And then our district is approaching eligibility for CEP or community eligibility provisions, where 50% of our students are at a point where they receive free meals. Now, one of the things that we talked about earlier is the disruption in the supply chain. I want to give a couple of notes, a couple bullet points on what's the root issues of the supply chain. If there are any questions, we'll pause after the next infrastructure slide, just in case. Let's go to the next slide.
Thank you, Cedric. As you can see, the supply chain issues are centered around 4 basic issues: labor, not enough staffing; plant efficiencies, not enough workers to meet supply and demand volatility; forecasting issues around supply chain; freight market and carrier capacity. As you can see, for every 1 truckload in supply, there are 6 truckloads in demand. Although this is a simplified overview, the ability to receive ample supply of product in the market has caused a huge disruption to our menu planning and forecasting analysis. Next slide.
Thank you, Nichelle. And to board member Ali's question early, as well as several other board members who questioned, our food and nutrition educational strategy may address some of those issues. As a 4th key strategy, food and nutrition as an educational strategy, we envision food and nutrition as a component of curriculum, not independent. This is a component of curriculum. Let's take a peek at some of the current educational opportunities, as well as some of the creative ideas forthcoming. We have a lot of things to spotlight: outdoor learning, Lakeview Forest and Garden, Lincoln Community Garden, Badger Rock site and instructional models, and Midville Community Gardens are just to name a few of the best practices around education. Food truck expansion, creative menu choices coming directly from our food truck partners at REAP. Educational themed meals forthcoming throughout the menu. Examples: a Caribbean-inspired dishes, Latin-inspired dishes, Asian-inspired dishes, all are reflective of the students in which we serve. Adoption of a Culinary Council, consisting of students, staff, and parents, listening to the voice of our students, allowing them to share what's on their mind we think is important. More vegan and vegetarian choices. Increasing our menu selection and choices. This is the perfect time to inspire new palates and form new eating habits. This also supports our animal welfare. Last couple items. Taste panels. We plan on developing taste panels to ensure maximum participation from our students and our community. Expansion of all natural seasonings, enhancing flavor profiles. Why can't we use rosemary, thyme, and basil and fresh ingredients that allow food to be bursting when it comes to a taste and flavor? And then lastly, updating our wellness policy to reflect our food service operation and the discussion around a community approach using a good food purchasing program. I'll turn it over to Melvin to close this out. Next, Delvin.
Thank you, Cedric. I was muted. Update of our wellness policy will be a focus for this year with a robust discussion around how we can utilize the full weight of our community to support our number 2 goal. Every school is a place where children, staff, and families thrive. To be successful, our work will be grounded in a long-term plan. MMSD intends to develop a long-term plan and is exploring working through the Good Food Purchasing Program. The Good Food Purchasing Program provides a metric-based, flexible framework that encourages large institutions to direct their buying power toward 5 core values. Those 5 core values are local economies, environmental sustainability, valued workforce, animal welfare, and nutrition. This concludes our presentation. On behalf of the entire food nutritional team, we thank MMSD Board of Education and Dr. Jenkins for the privilege of serving as your food and nutrition team. As always, we look forward to adding value to the services we offer and finding collaborative ways to improve our partnership with the MMSD community. Now we will open up for questions.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just so I can see people, and then we will open this up to questions. Maya.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you all for the presentation and great job, Chris and Barb, and for navigating through that technical difficulty. I just had a quick question about just locally grown food. Madison is one of the places that, you know, that I really appreciate how much we focus on our local grown food, local farmers, local restaurants, and really supporting the local initiative. So I know Badger Rock has does like the urban farming, and we have other local urban farmers. I guess my question is just how much food is grown by our schools, if we know that offhand, and then what, I guess, would it take for us to make that more sustainable to a point where we're also growing most of, like the children are growing most of the food that they're actually eating and consuming in their communities. So just a quick question. Well, probably quick, maybe not.
Yeah, great question, Maya. To your specific question, do a local school grow enough food to feed an entire school? No. The reality of it is the more optimal way is to work with local co-ops so that we can have the proper amount of food. You're talking about over 50 plus schools, and trying to unify our menus, trying to synchronize our menus. Our large big box distributors are typically the ones, if we put metrics in place around quantity of local items, the amount, et cetera, what farms it come from, we can control the narrative a little bit better. And Maggie may be able to speak to what local farms we have dealt with historically. But I think that this is a really huge opportunity for us to look at it from a, when you mentioned when I mentioned the Good Food Purchasing Program itself, that is a metric-based group that help us to pull all key stakeholders together so that the inventory supply itself and the advanced planning, the number and quantity that you need in the forecasting is all there. And so it's something definitely we want to explore. And if Maggie have any comment about any of the local farms we've dealt with, you're more than welcome to do it.
Yeah, Perfection Produce out of Albany, Wisconsin is one of our primary farm partners. We also partner with smaller family farms, usually through REAP Food Group, when we're able to get smaller quantities of produce, usually for like a single offering on the menu. One thing that is a big challenge for our department in terms of local produce is the processing aspect of it, because produce has to be minimally processed, including cleaning, before we can serve it. So we have to either partner with that or find labor and time to process it ourselves.
Thank you for your responses. Sorry, My computer is very glitchy right now. But yeah, thank you for those answers. I do think it would be pretty dope if we can find ways to have our kids, understanding growing and food. And, my kids participated in Badger Rock garden initiatives for families and such for the past couple of years. And I think with the pandemic and with all the issues of the supply chain and, getting stuff from other places, I think this is a real opportunity for our district to be innovative and really investing in ways that we can have our children invest in the healthy ways and growing food and understanding, like taking those skills as they grow older, but also too that we are supporting our local farmers in a much more, larger capacity than we do now. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what we come up with, but that was my question.
Thank you.
Ollie?
Yeah, so I have two questions. My first question is about waste that is generated through our food. So in terms of composting, recycling, and trash, what does it look like to better orientate our students to what parts of their trash and from their lunch should be composted in terms of the environment? What parts of the packaging are going to end up in a landfill and what parts can be recycled? So how do we have that conversation with our students? And then I have another question that's specific to our students' physical health.
A great question. Board Member Ali, two parts to it. Part number one, there's an educational component as it relates to what can we do specifically for our children. We are working with our community partners to help us to develop that process. Process number one, sustained aim. We've been working with them collaboratively over the last, since I've been here, last 3 months. Our food service team, Nichelle and Melvin just got here really first part of August. If Maggie want to say anything in regards toward some of the pilot studies you've run, Maggie, historically, and the information and what we're trying to do to control waste.
Yeah, we have had pilot studies at specific elementary schools looking at composting, recycling, and obviously the landfill aspect of our meal programs. That was a pretty large undertaking. One of the schools we did was Leopold Elementary. We had to partner really closely with the custodial team there to make sure that everyone was on the same page in terms of where we were taking items. So overall, it was a very successful pilot, but it was definitely impacted by COVID as well. And now having classroom feeding is further impacting how we're able to move forward with that pilot.
Maggie, thank you so much for speaking to that. And I'll just say I greatly support any pilot that we're doing in terms of composting, and I would like that to be a large-scale district-wide initiative. I also think making sure our students take field trips to landfills and are oriented to what it means to put something in the trash and what that means for the environment. I think so many of our young people would be deeply impacted by exposure to that, but also benefit greatly from understanding, what it means for something to decompose versus, something to sit in a landfill for a really long time. And I think there's so much science and so much information that our young people can get from really taking into consideration the waste that we create at lunch every day. My other question is really specific to the physical health of our students. If we are promoting a healthy diet for our young people, it means we're also promoting healthy hydration, which means we're also promoting healthy digestion. And we have our students are often required to ask permission to go to the bathroom. And so normalizing how often a young person throughout their growth and development should go to the bathroom, given an 8-hour, 10-hour span school day, I think is something we have to talk about and make normal. Our students should be hydrated and therefore they should be going to the bathroom. And I'm curious how we are going to protect our students' basic right to their bodily functions and their dignity as part of this conversation. So what are we doing to support students' access to restrooms? How are we normalizing conversations about access to the restroom? And how often each day should kids, depending on their age, be using the bathroom if they're hydrated and if their digestion is healthy and the food that they're eating supports healthy digestion?
Yeah, well, definitely wonderful point. I would probably answer it in two phases. Part number one, I do think the access to our water bubblers that we placed inside the schools, I do know that curriculum is allowing for students to have some type of water bottle at their personal desk. As far as the specifics about when they would go to the restrooms and the frequency of it, I would probably have to yield that to some of my curriculum folks here on the line, if they would be more than welcome to share. I simply don't know that aspect of it, but certainly it's encouraging. I would also add, I think that hydration stations is a part of our upcoming wellness. We would like to implement in our wellness policy hydration stations in the cafeteria where you can get fruit infused water or some element to bring about a little taste toward water, not just the water fountain itself, but anything that's going to generate an excitement around drinking water. And we also know from a historical standpoint that water also is a nutrient. It will supply you the necessary oxygen for learning as well. So excellent point, and I'll yield to any of my colleagues from the curriculum side.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and take that.
Earlier too.
I'll go ahead and take that question. Actually, within Dr. Fryer, Chief Academic Officer and School Chiefs, that's really a fabulous question that you're raising, President Moultrie. And it's a discussion that's kind of going on, but just need to become more robust as we're thinking about just wellness and healthy nutrition and all of this together. But it just needs to become more robust. There are individuals within the schools. And also, Mr. Hodo, the conversation in terms of just the supply and demand has also begun a discussion with us about more vegan type meals. Our students are asking us at the high school and the middle school level in terms of vegan. And today, I actually had a conversation with the elementary principal about this as we're facing this pandemic and facing food supply chain demand. We're also beginning to just look at different ways that we can serve our students and our adults better in our schools. So this is a great discussion about hydration, but also the one about different eating styles that can lead to healthier lives for all of us.
Yeah, I am curious about how we want to emphasize healthy digestion and how we want to make sure students have access to the restroom and how we normalize students being excused from class to use the restroom. I also want to say I really appreciate your comments around vegan and vegetarian, gluten-free options and making sure we have accessible food in our schools. But I will say my partner works at Senate Middle School, and he came home one day. He very rarely complains to me about what's going on at school, but he came home and just said students got 2 breadsticks and marinara sauce for lunch today, and I think that's not a vegan lunch. That is a lack of food, and so I think really making sure we're giving young people healthy meals that allow for them to have the energy it takes to learn. I was on free or reduced lunch my entire educational experience. In high school, I ate 1 piece of pizza at lunch each day, which it's just not enough food, honestly, for an adolescent body to be successful during the day. I was perpetually hungry, and it impacted the way that I behaved and the way that I felt about myself and about my educational environment. So I think I appreciate, our ability to navigate vegan options. And I also think we have to be really conscious of whether or not we're providing, enough food for students. And if that is part of the dilemma of kind of our current supply and demand reality, I think we have to be pretty agile in figuring out how to accommodate the needs of our young people.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you.
I certainly agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Ollie. Nikki, and then Chris.
Yep. Two questions. One, I'm worried on food insecurity, like President Boudreau mentioned. I'm getting reports of students got a ham sandwich with one piece of ham and half a slice of bread and nothing else. And I'm starting to seriously worry if we have enough to feed our students and how this is going to be addressed. That's point number one. Two, I worry on healthy options. And three, I want to uplift Ali's comment on bathrooms. Currently, there are a lot of bathroom policies, and one which happens to be new in one of our schools that says you can't use the restroom for the first 10 minutes of class unless you have certain needs. Well, the problem being is when you do that, you will also single out the disabled for more torment, because then people say you have something we don't have. And no child should be denied access to the bathroom. If they're using it as an escape, that means there's something wrong. It does, or they might have a bladder issue. Is there a way we could look at, or at least offer guidance to these schools stating this policy is not okay?
Well, thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. To address your first one, as far as food insecurities, food quantities, we are aware that there's a severe shortage. Under no circumstances should it impact what we serve. We know that we've had to maneuver and pivot on a lot of menus and recipe options, but in regards to a specific recipe components and the number of items necessary for a reimbursed meal, we'll make sure that we'll address the team and we'll come back with a written response in regards toward that comment. The other comment around healthy options, we totally agree with you on that. This is a huge disruption. When I tell you that the entire team is pivoting on a daily basis, just to make sure that we have enough inventory in, it is very challenging right now. Dr. Jenkins mentioned a very key point, and I put it in the board memo a couple of weeks ago around the food shortage around meats. There is a severe shortage around meats right now. And so it gives us an opportunity to open up to more vegan, vegetarian choices. And we should also embrace that opportunity from a diet and nutritional standpoint. So we're certainly doing the best we can. I'll make sure I dig in with my team to make sure that this communication continues to our parents, to our families, to our board members, and you have everything that you need to make an informed decision. But certainly thank you for the feedback.
And my third point on the bathrooms, is there a way we could raise that issue that these policies can single out the disabled who need to use them more? There's nothing more humiliating than a 7th grader having to multiple ask permission while everyone stares at them because no one else is allowed to use the bathroom for the first 10 minutes except for the disabled. That you end up with a target on your back.
No, very good point. I'll address our chiefs. I'll pull together Dr. Pryor and Kaylee and her team and see what we can do to support our curriculum team and ensuring that they have the needs that they need.
Yeah. Thanks, Nikki. Chris and then Ananda.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Hodo, for addressing the supply chain issues and the shortages that you're seeing and how your team is pivoting to adjust to that. Is there anything we can do on a local school level? Do the schools have any flexibility or power if there is a shortage on some day to sort of problem solve that? Or is there, I don't know, is there something that we can do to help you creatively problem solve that? I don't know what that would look like, but just, of course, like everybody else, really interested in making sure that everybody has enough to eat in our schools on a daily basis. So.
Yeah, thank you, Board Member Gomes-Smith. I'll turn that over to the food and nutrition team. I do know that Maggie is championing our ordering process. She's searching vendors, not just regionally, not just locally, but regionally as well. And Maggie, if you want to bring the team up just in it may be a higher level bullet point kind of problem, from a collaborative problem solving, and some of the things that you've done just to make sure that food is in the district.
Yeah, so we have really expanded the number of vendors that we're working with to try to ensure that we have food on a daily basis. And so our prime vendor sends out a list of what food is in stock at each week to use for ordering. So it's kind of a completely different ballpark in terms of looking at what they actually have instead of what we were anticipating they would have. I think from a local perspective and working with our schools, one of the biggest things we can do is really encourage communication amongst the staff. I think there are a lot of times that the perception is that the kitchen doesn't have something when really we learn later that it was just never asked. And so, you know, really great communication between school staff and our food service staff is really going to be something that's going to help make sure that everyone has what they need.
Thank you, Maggie.
Great, thank you. And then I guess my question is on the timeline for reimagining or taking a look and at how our food service works and to do things differently. Can you explain a little bit about the timeline we're looking at for the wellness policy and an analysis of our staffing levels and what needs to change and how that will fit into our budget process?
Very good point. Myself, this is the first step at least alerting the board to the direction and our vision. I think the second steps for me is to sit down and coordinate with Ross. Myself and Ross have been having exploratory conversations around the critical things that are absolutely needed, the investments that's needed. There was a study done back in Ross's, if he's online, he can help me. I simply don't know the specific name of the study, but there was a study done that I would like to kind of pick up and take a look at it, revisit it around what specific needs and the cost rationale around it. Ross, if you can speak to that just for a second, because I think we can take the essence of that and possibly update it and come up with a plan for the board, even if it's an incremental steps toward getting where we got to go. Ross.
Thanks, Cedric. As I recall, back in the 12-13 school year or thereabouts, there was a study that was chartered by a group out of Boulder, Colorado, that was discussing the concept of scratch cooking and upgrading a lot of our kitchens, the production center, and really trying to figure out how do we get more developed in the school buildings and cooked in the buildings. Because as we know, we have a lot of older buildings in the district where a lot of them are serving out of closets or repurposed smaller areas that can do a little more than push warming trays out, so we can do the offer versus serve discussion, right? At the time, the study came out with a rather high price tag, and I don't want to quote an incorrect number, but I will say that it was millions of dollars to implement that would have required either a lengthy referendum discussion or some advanced planning to go to that scale. At the time, the board was not ready to have that discussion, so that report did not move forward. However, there were aspects of that report, and I believe the first couple of years that Steve Youngbar was here, that were worth considering. And we tried to do a lot of that on our own using our existing facilities. We did a lot of menu previews for wraps and different types of salad bars. And some of those things have been implemented to this point with some success. But many of the things we tried to pilot that were more organic or that were more locally sourced, cost became a very quickly issue. Going back to the slide that Cedric had up before about the year-end performances for Fund 50, there were multiple years where we had a deficit. And though I can't directly point to which years it was involved, I know that the testing years we did invest a little bit of our own money, including a transfer from Fund 10 to keep Fund 50 whole for those years, because we did not have enough operating resources to make those changes permanent.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. So Board Member Gomez-Schmidt, I do think this is certainly an ambitious goal. I would like to sit down with our accounting team, with our senior exec team to begin to outline that for you. I think if you give me about 6 months, our team is currently analyzing the totality of their team. We're in the midst of a global pandemic. We're in the midst of a food shortage. And certainly our top priorities now is to ensure that all our kids eat. And as it becomes better, I do think that we can get the information to you so that we can lay forth a plan moving forward.
That sounds great. Thanks for all the work you're doing. I also just wanted to say that I'm excited about the good food purchasing program and what little I did read about that. So whatever we can do to, include that in the analysis, that would be great. I'm excited to learn more about that. So thanks for all the work on this.
Board member.
Thank you.
And the other board members, 6 months mean not in this budget cycle.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. We are long-term planning for.
Absolutely.
Is that it, Chris?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Ananda?
Thank you so much, Board Member Carusi. I want to say first, thank you so much, Cedric, for first introducing the team. So welcome, Michelle, Melvin, and Maggie to our board meetings and to our team. And also, thank you so much for the sharpness of, I'll call simplistically, like this sort of research analysis of what's the current state and adding the landscape that we are navigating to and the complexity of that landscape. I have 3 points on the presentation. I want to elevate a couple of them as just bullets, because I think my board colleagues have already shared some of them in different ways. My daughter was in elementary school when we had the first sort of pilot salad bar at elementary school. And, a lot of people are like, kids are not going to eat salad. And we're like, yes, they will. And it's not just something that we wanted to offer as far as, with greater nutritional value, with less waste, but also modeling how how we're navigating, where we are in regards to food. Waste, the engagement with families and students around food and the cycle of food. I think the overall alignment with our own policy around sustainable practices and reducing carbon footprint, the relationship, the interdisciplinarity approach to food and nutrition, as also a vehicle to science, to math, to literature, to history. So I think there is so much there to explore, and I really appreciate, what this experience, this presentation is bringing to us. And then I want a couple points around accessibility to vegan, gluten-free, vegetarian, and also the importance of highlighting intestinal disabilities as one of the fastest growing disabilities in health. As someone that I'm an out disabled person, and I'm one of the people that you often see me eating in board meetings, even when people call me out because of that, and also the way in which we are navigating our children's and our students' needs in regards to what feels nurturing for their body, and what does it look like to message and to shift the way in which we are supporting our students and our families. I want to add one more comment to my colleague Nikki Vandermeulen's point in regards to students with disabilities and the struggles that with certain policies and how certain policies end up targeting those students. I also wanted to expand that to girls and how girls have a very different relationship to bathroom, relationship to nutrition, relationship to like having to eat snacks at different times depending on what's happening. Also, different age groups will have different needs as well. I also wanted to want to bring up the something that was not shared yet, is how different communities have different relationships to how we eat and what times we eat and the amounts that we eat. So as a member of the Latinx community, it's not uncommon for us to have a smaller breakfast, but a really large lunch. Actually, we don't call it lunch because lunch means like a snack in our language. So it's actually a meal. I appreciate you mentioning the time and actually, I think the whole cultural process around sitting and actually eating as a means to, this is your time to nurture your body. This is your time to, engage with nutrition and be mindful of what you're ingesting. So I want to highlight that I think different communities are negotiating that differently, and that can be quite a cultural shock when families enroll their students and then learn that they have about 15 minutes to chow down, to be in line, chow down some food, and then have to go to a break. I wanted to bring two other points that are not what I just said. And I just wanted to see, Cedric, if you or anyone on your team wanted to say anything about what I just mentioned. I know I kind of covered a lot of points, but I know you have addressed some of them already.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We certainly are on the same page, believe it or not. To your first point around salad bars, absolutely phenomenal idea. I have ran model food service operations across the United States. So I have a very good in-depth background of not only the intent of food salad bars, but also the magnitude on how it changed culture. The introduction of new items and new tastes. This was very huge from an educational standpoint. You mentioned about recycling and waste and sustainability. I think by partnering with some of our communities and helping us to define what that looks like and supporting curriculum and teaching around that. See, it's not just about throwing it away. It's about the education around it. It's the proper utensils. It's the spending the quality time. It's the marketing. It's the literature. It's a total educational concept. And so groups like the Good Food Purchasing Program have turnkey type options that they can bring to the district that we don't have to go reinvent the wheel. We have a huge opportunity here. I just got off the conference call today with University of Madison, Ms. Gaddis, Jennifer Gaddis. And in our discussion, we talked about these same things and what we can do and how the university can support us with the data to support our research. You mentioned, which I thought was very critical, the intersectionality of food and nutrition when it crosses with curriculum. I think that this is a huge missing opportunity. We have bits and pieces, but to Ali's information earlier, I want to see a comprehensive approach to all of our schools. Why should some of the marginalized schools not have the same access to Badger Rock students and the educational components attached to garden and community gardens? I think that is something that can be duplicated properly, but we're working through that right now for your purpose. How do we take the components in a garden that they can teach in class and then duplicate the menu across the district? That's the next steps for my team. Come to the production center kitchen, help our chefs extrapolate a menu. So it's different when you just have to make a classroom, 10, 15 students or 20 students, but when you have to make enough for 22,000 students, the game changes. You have to know how to order that, when to get it in, how to cook it from scratch, how to deliver it. There's a lot of logistics around that. The last piece for me, I think that resonated more so, I'm aware of some of the dietary habits of not just yourself, but members of your family, where when we looked at our menu, we recognize we're heavy on cheese and dairy. And the reality of it is, some people just don't necessarily agree with that, but we should have multiple options, and it should not just be salads every day. And so I'm working with Maggie and the food nutrition team to come up with innovative recipes using components that are fresh, flavor profile, and that we vetted through our chefs. I think we have some really good community partners that will help us with that. So that's key. Absolutely, we're on the same page. And the last comment around students with disabilities. I think we have nowhere to go but up. I know Maggie is working hard on specialty diets. She has, well over 1,000 specialty diets that she has created individually on a yearly basis when you throw all of our students. But the reality of it is we're simply not there. And I want to thank the team, and this is not nothing negative. I think every time we run into something like this, it affords us the opportunity to use our consolidated resources. I've reached out to Board Member Carusi to ask her, will she help connect our team members to these vital resources in the community? And she has a wealth of knowledge in this particular area. And I want to thank her for giving us the leeway to at least advance. And I'll close on this note. From our vantage point, I think it's important. We're in the process of not just reestablishing relationships, but forming new relationships. We had 2 food service directors retire, and that is a huge gap. However, I do believe that the team that we have assembled, they've been forming together. They've been leaning forward with intentionality and humanity. They're leaning in, and they've come in the midst of, like we said, a very tough time period. But I can tell you, they are committed to ensuring that our kids have the best. And I want to thank them for navigating through these very crucial conversations. May not be something that's tough to hear, but I fully embrace your vision, Board Member Morelli, and we'll make sure that we give you direct follow-up pertaining to your questions.
This is so beautiful. Thank you so much for really taking the time to address many parts of my comments. I will wrap up with the last 2 comments. One, which has a little bit of to do with something you said at the end. And then one in regards to one of the slides that you showed us around the salary of workers that we often now call them essential workers, that don't get paid as essential anything. And how I think in that slide alone demonstrate how we are speaking to salaries of folks that are essential to our functioning, even as a school district, and how that issue got exacerbated during COVID. And I really just kind of wanted to give you an opportunity to explore a little bit more. Like, to me, at $27,000 a year is not a sustainable living wage for anyone that lives in Madison. And if a person doesn't live in Madison, that means that they added gas price or transportation price on top of their living expenses. And as someone that have been in that bracket not that long ago, with a daughter and as a single mother, I know I speak from personal experience. And then the second question is really an opportunity for you and your team to let us know what you need from us and the community to continue to highlight the importance, what all the things that you identify and brought up for us today.
Well, definitely, certainly, thank you for at least acknowledging, and to all the board members for acknowledging that there is a gap. I'll be working with Ross. I'll also be working with HR to determine what is that wage analysis, do a competitive benchmarking to see if there's opportunities. We know that there's a cost to that. And I want to make sure that our team members, as well as the district financial position, is supported. When you looked at some of the things that was done for teachers and other essential workers, we can easily make the case that the food service team, they worked tirelessly to ensure that our community was fed. The boxes that they stood out and gave away. And so we know about some of the heroic actions of our food service team. I don't think that they should be marginalized. I think that they should be appreciated. The reality of it is there is a learning curve when it comes towards scratch cooking. There is an educational component attached to this here that we have to invest in first. So think in terms of a seed being planted. Its roots anchor first, and then the plant comes out of the ground, and then fruit is produced off that tree. Well, the same concept we're taking. We're not trying to put the cart first, put the horse before the cart. Our focus is really going to be a simple: humanity first, human capital investments, giving our team members the time to learn, grow, and develop. We have some team members who only know heat and serve. That's it. And if you ask them to prepare something from scratch, they don't know measurements, they don't know recipes. There's a lot of things that our team members have to be trained on, and we have to put forth the time. We have developmental days I mentioned in there too, your personal development days, where historically on PD days, our team went home. Well, now on PD days, they're training days for her. You're coming inside, you're going to the culinary kitchen, you're working on recipes and concepts and knife cutting skills, safety equipment, how to operate the oven properly, how to clean it. All these are essential components. You spoke to, and I'll close on this one here, you spoke to labor rates. Now, I think that this is a topic that will require some time, but I really would like us to do this. When we came on board here, my food service team came in the midst of August. They came on board with almost 50, close to 60, if I'm not mistaken, vacancies. Now, a lot of people simply did not come back from the summer months. So not only were they behind, but they simply did not have enough staff to get out to the schools. And so our team did a rapid hiring session, and we was able to stabilize as much as possible. But part of that rationale was the reality, some people made more money sitting at home than coming to work for food service. And when we found that out, you know, as checks begin to stop, then people begin to come back to work. But that is a reality of what we're dealing with. And so I think for us to retain and recruit qualified talent, we have to put incentive measures in place. We have, as long as a person is growing and developing in their role, I think it's going to make it best for the entire culinary program across not just this region, but across the state. Madison has some of the best restaurants you can imagine to be a small local town, but we're right on the verge of the infrastructure of our hospitality staff. We need to invest in it right now. Our culinary schools internally. We have a lot of things here that if we invest in now, we'll win in the district long term. And then finally, our culinary councils. I think hearing the voices of our students, the NAMA and the young gentleman who spoke today, these are brilliant kids. If we get the voice of them to help us navigate through the menus and the choices, I think ultimately we'll begin to generate greater revenue as well as the atmosphere and the ambiance that will get our kids to the next level.
Thank you so much, Cedric, for everything that you said. And thank you so much for also painting how immoral our current landscape in regards to wages, and that, you know, people are not making a living wage while working for an educational institution. And I'm fully prepared to, I know Dr. Jenkins already said, not in this budget cycle, but I'm fully prepared to commit to it, whatever it is viable this year, to begin to have some conversation where no one in our district we earn anything less than $15 an hour. That does not feel like a huge lift. I know it is financially. I know it matters a lot. But I think it's just the beginning in order for us to rectify a lot of historical wrongs that we are now potentially for the first time noticing as a society. So thank you so much, Cedric, for your leadership. I have been really impressed with how you've been leading the district, and this presentation does not surprise me, but I'm really excited about how you've been looking at your role, holistically, and really excited to what's coming in the next 6 months. Thank you so much for the entire team for this brilliant work.
Board Member Morelli, let me make sure that I'm clarifying something for the board. Not the whole plan. He presented the whole plan. As we're going through this budget cycle, if he did mention slightly about incremental, we will take incremental opportunities to begin to correct some of the things that we know are historical wrongs. So it's not to say that we're going to do the whole plan. There is still an opportunity. And I thank you, Mr. Hodo. Thank you, Board Member Morelli, for recognizing that entire team, because they are too a fantastic team. Thank you so much for that and this opportunity for them to present. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I've got a couple questions, and I want to make sure anyone else who has questions gets the opportunity to ask them. I guess my first question is actually a request for information. I've heard out in our school communities that one place people would very much like to see us invest our one-time dollars is in outdoor education facilities. And I would think that would include school gardens. It would be really useful to know which of our schools have gardens and which of those gardens are actually running and maintained and being used. It would also be helpful to know what we are doing with the farmland that we own on the east side. I believe that Rooted is working that land, but that's an educational opportunity for urban agriculture that we have, if an investment of one-time dollars could help us utilize that better and work better with our community partners, I think we should think about it. So that's my request for information. When it comes to our employees, I greatly appreciate your raising the need for a wage increase for our lowest paid employees. You also mentioned the need to change job descriptions and implement an evaluation process. And I'm just wondering how we're going to work with our union AFSCME to do those things.
Yep, certainly good point. To your first point about the school guards, we'll make sure we get that in the written format as far as what schools, what they're doing, et cetera. The farm on the east side, I'll work with the team to get that updated to see what we're doing. In regards to what we're looking at. So what we're finding, Board Member Cruz, is that some of our—
It would be really useful to know which of our schools have gardens.
I don't know if there's some background noise. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. I think what's critical for us is in the evaluation process, we need to ensure that our job descriptions are meeting the reality of the needs of our constituents. I think in the assessment piece, I think Melvin and Nichelle is doing a really good job of determining people's skill set. There is a wide variety of individuals in multiple positions without skill sets. And our first rationale is, hey, let's figure out what training that they need to get developed. Second rationale is prepare for them cross-training or learning opportunities. I think the key component for us is how will we invest in them? What are the hours looked at? So when we looked at for budgeting and analysis and things of that nature, we found that we have relatively little to no time outside of the upfront training in the year when we first start. There's no additional supplemental training. In regards toward the assessment piece, we have established audits, which becomes a baseline for our success. Have your meals been prepared? Are they reaching optimal temperature? Are they being served properly? What is recipe compliance? What is your production record looks like? There's a lot of components that go along with that food. What is our meal reconciliation reports looking like? Premier Edge reporting. There's a systematic way by which the state is quantifying our reimbursements. And what we found that there was some huge gaps in our paperwork relative to where we're actually currently at. And so we have to go back and start with a simple foundation first of let's figure out where our teams are. Let's start building on that foundation. Some people need some needs more training than others, but I do think that Nichelle has a good solid plan. And Nichelle, you're more than welcome to speak on, you and Melvin, on the training aspect that you've done, even the most recent Premier Edge training.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'll speak to that subject. So in implementing Premier Edge, currently they were already using Premier Edge, but not all the components to Premier Edge. One of the components to Premier Edge is production and inventory. We are centered around development, teaching how we procure, how we prepare, and how we accurately record waste, right, when it comes to Premier Edge. We have just started training for Premier Edge as of last Friday. So we had the opportunity for our elementary staff to come in on Friday, receive 4 hours of training, virtual from Premier Edge trainers, implementing processes that will make us, and as a whole, control a lot of the a lot of the components that I noticed, Melvin and myself noticed coming in as far as how accurate we could be as far as recording, like I said, production, how much forecasting properly, food forecast per school, and do we have enough food? Are we actually recording the way we should be recording when it comes to how many kids is enrolled in the building, right? There's a process around that. And how do we capture food costs? How do we maintain waste? How do we recycle, as far as the food that we can actually for our show stable processing? How does that look as a total package? So I think right now we are rolling out Premier Edge, and we trying to get that into the system by December, but just making sure that they have a basic understanding of the importance of inventory control, the importance of forecasting properly going forward when it comes to feeding our kids on a daily basis. So that is something we're tackling right now, and being able to have, really be responsible for the food that they actually have on hand. That's the inventory purpose. So we are controlling that. We are implementing these programs to uplift and to self-develop our staff.
Just to follow up to that, if hourly staff are attending additional professional development, are they being paid?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my final comment is just about the food purchasing program, which I'm really excited to see Mmsd path. Like, kudos to you for heading in that direction. I think it's a great way for us to go. I think COVID has revealed really intense issues in the conventional food supply chain at schools and elsewhere, particularly when you're very dependent on one vendor. And I think one of the big benefits over the long term of good food purchasing programs, it may actually allow us to diversify our supply chain a little bit more so that we don't run into situations like this in the future. And I'm excited for that possibility. And I think that's in itself is a reason for us to jump into this and do this work. However, in the short term, I just want to echo that these supply chain issues are real and they are impacting kids. And I'm hearing about teachers using their snack supply to supplement what we're serving for lunch because it's not enough food. And anything the board can do to help ameliorate these issues, please come to us. Give us proposals, because we want to make sure all of our children have enough food as we get them through COVID and get back hopefully to a more stable situation in terms of suppliers. That's it. You don't have to respond to that. I'm just really excited about good food purchasing program, and I'm glad to see us heading in a direction where hopefully we'll be more stable down the road.
Absolutely. Thank you for your comments and feedback.
Great. Any other questions or comments? If not, let's move on to our presentation on enrollment and class size. And Ross, are you providing that presentation tonight?
I am not. I believe that's research and innovation. Brianne, I believe.
Okay, Brianne. Brianne, I will go ahead and share the slideshow here.
All right, thank you. So I am here tonight with my teammate Grady Brown to go over our enrollment report, which was shared in the materials for this board meeting. You can go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to provide a little bit of background about our enrollment reporting process before Grady, who led the analysis this year, is going to go over our results and trends analysis. So a little background on our enrollment report. Every year, MMSD takes a snapshot of student enrollment on the third Friday of September. Our enrollment team reports these numbers to DPI, which serves as our official district enrollment counts that are used to inform the funding process. Then our team, the Institutional Research and Evaluation Office, analyzes and summarizes these counts to share with the district leaders and the Board of Education, typically in November at this time. We also use these numbers to produce projections for next year's enrollment, which are used in our planning and allocation processes. So I want to provide a little bit of background about that projection model. The projection model that MMSD uses is a sound vetted technique that is the same as that which is used in districts locally and nationally, other districts locally and nationally. And that is recommended by industry leaders, including our colleagues at the UW's Applied Population Lab. Although we believe our projection methodology is strong, projections are inherently a starting place and a best guess that are built on a set of assumptions regarding conditions in and beyond our control. And just to add that over the last 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic added a bunch of uncertainty to those sets of assumptions, which has increased the complexity of the projections. So in the presentation that follows, we'll share sort of some highlights about this year's enrollment counts, how it compares to previous years, as well as next year's projections. The report that was shared in the materials for the meeting tonight contains a more detailed, comprehensive set of information to that we're highlighting in this presentation. Move on to the next slide. Thank you. So our presentation tonight and our report is really organized and guided by 3 research questions. The first question that we will go over tonight is, what was MMSD's third Friday enrollment in 2021-22? Second, how do we model our projections for the coming year? And what is the enrollment in next year, 2022-23, projected to be across the district? And then lastly, and maybe most interesting, what might be influencing those shifts in enrollment in this school year and the projected enrollment for next school year? So I'm going to turn it over to Grady now, who led this analysis, to kind of take us through the answers to those questions. So in the presentation that follows, we'll share.
Great, thanks, Bree. So the first question that we wanted to address was looking at what our current enrollment looks like during the 21-22 school year.
Katie, excuse me, I think we can hear a YouTube. I don't know if it's from you or somebody else.
That is a good question. I am not on. Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, the first question that we want to look at was what our current enrollment looks like in the 21-22 school year. So we'll do that on the next slide. So enrollment, oh, not that slide, one back.
Sometimes my computer gets a little too excited and jumps.
No, it's okay. There's neat stuff on the next slide too, but first we'll just talk about what our overall enrollment looks like this year. And that number is 25,396 students. Now, when we're talking enrollment in the report and in during the slide deck presentation, we're talking about our 4K through 12th grade enrollment during the third Friday snapshot. So this year we had a decrease of 482 students from last year. And while it's a decrease, it's certainly a smaller decrease than what we saw last year. And when we look at grade buckets, what we saw was that among our elementary, 4K, and middle school grade levels, we saw decreases in enrollment. But in high school, we saw increases in enrollment. And those are reflected in the table below. So now we can move on to that next slide. So while we looked at overall enrollment numbers, we also want to look at the demographics of the school district. And what we found was that this school year, when we looked at a variety of student demographics, looked really similar to last year. There's a lot of stability, certainly with some slight changes here and there. So first we looked at the racial ethnic breakup of our district. And again, we've got a table here showing you the overall number. That graphic on the bottom, each of those bars is going to equal 100%. It's the proportional makeup of our district. We provide a little bit more detail in the report and certainly some additional breakouts of these data. But again, we see a lot of stability this year compared to last school year. And we can move on to the next slide where we're going to see that we looked at additional demographics as well. And again, a lot of stability. This year looked really similar to last year, even with that change in overall enrollment. Again, the same looks, looking at a table of overall numbers and some graphical representations of what that looked like this year compared to last year and some previous years. So a lot of stability, but certainly some slight changes as well. So on the next slide, we also looked at enrollment across the school district in our schools, and we noticed that this varied across the district. Some schools had noticeable changes between this year and last year. Other schools, not a lot of change. And again, we have a lot of great breakdowns in the report. Just a few highlights for you all here on this slide. When we looked at our elementary schools, about a fourth of them had increases in enrollments. Almost all of our middle schools had decreases in enrollment, and 4 of our 6 high schools had increases in enrollment. And those changes range from an increase of 47 students to a decrease of 57 students. For our 4K, and we'll touch on this a little bit later in the presentation, we saw increases at our full day 4K school sites and decreases at our off-site and early care education sites. And so after we looked at our current enrollment, the next thing we want to look at is, well, how do we model our projection for the upcoming year? And once we understand what adjustments we need to make, what does our projected 22-23 enrollment look like in the district? And we'll start with the next slide. So first we looked at our projection model. And as Bree talked about this, the foundation of this is built on what you find in the industry. But we also knew that the last 2 years have been rather unique. And so we actually went back to folks in the industry and said, hey, how are you adjusting your model? What changes should we bring back to our model? And after we did that, we wound up with a model that we've tried to kind of graphically represent in that figure below, where we are taking a base number, that's our 3rd Friday of September count, and we're multiplying it by a grade to grade progression rate. And here's where we made the slight change. That's a 5-year average of grade to grade progression rates. But we actually removed any aberrant rates that are really high or really low compared to that average that are probably because of a unique situation. So we took those rates out and we multiplied those together, we get our projection. So that's what the model looks like. We can go to the next slide. When we made those adjustments, they're based on a set of assumptions. And here we want to be clear and consistent with the assumptions that we're making in our projection model. And if these assumptions look familiar, and hopefully they do, it's because these are very similar to these 3 assumptions that we used last year during our projection model. So the first assumption that we make is that the landscape of the COVID-19 pandemic will be different in 22-23. At the same time, the district will continue to offer different models of instruction together, kind of leading to a negligible impact on our 22-23 enrollment. Now, under that assumption, our projection model might overestimate projected 22-23 enrollment if the landscape of the COVID-19 pandemic persists into next year. The next assumption we make is looking at those early grades. It's a slightly different model. Instead of using that base number 3rd Friday, we use birth rates for those early grades. And this assumption states that our 4K and kindergarten students will enroll in the district at normal rates in 22-23, again, when the landscape of the COVID-19 pandemic shifts. So as a result, we're still going to use birth rates in our modeling projections. And under this assumption, our projection model might overestimate the projected 22-23 enrollment if the landscape of the COVID-19 pandemic persists into next year. That last assumption is that our 1st through 12th grade students who left the district this year will not return later in this school year or before at the beginning of the 22-23 school year. Under that assumption, our projection model might underestimate the projected 22-23 enrollment if we see that actually families and students are returning to the district before the next 3rd Friday. So again, we want to make sure that we're very clear and articulate the assumptions that our model is based upon. And we can head to the next slide. So after we made those adjustments and outline the assumptions that were made, we were able to run our projection model. What we found was that the projected enrollment for next year for our 4K through 12th grade students is 25,238 students. And that represents a decrease of 158 students from the current school year. When we looked at grade levels, what that looks like is we projected an increase in 4K enrollment, a decrease in our elementary and middle school enrollment, and our high school enrollment projected to be pretty stable to what you see this year. And so the table is showing a grade by grade breakdown of the history and that one projected year next year in 22-23. Again, there's a lot of great breakdowns in the report that just show this projection model in different ways. So we can go on to the next slide. So we looked at our current enrollment, looked at our projected enrollment. The last thing we would talk about today, and the last thing that we talk about as a team, is what might be impacting the current enrollment and what might impact our projected enrollment, future enrollment in 22-23. And we'll start on the next slide. We want to touch on 3 things tonight. And the first is looking at birth rates in Dane County. And these rates continue to decline, which likely is impacting our early grade 4K and kindergarten enrollment projections. It's really important to note here that even before the COVID-19 pandemic, we were projecting a decrease in enrollment in part because of these decreasing birth rates. And the reason being, we're trying to graphically represent here, is that those early grade projections and actual enrollments tend to mirror what we see in the birth rate. So that graphic that you see, the line chart on the right says number of kindergarten students. That's showing our actual and projected kindergarten enrollment. The dark blue is our actual enrollment, and that light blue is a projected enrollment. On the left, we see birth rates. Again, those dark blue dots are showing historical actual rates. That one light blue dot is a projected birth rate, eligible birth rate in Dane County. If you can think about kind of overlaying them, you see that they do mirror each other. Certainly there was an impact of COVID-19. You can see that kind of in that dip. But that's kind of what we're talking about, of how these decreasing birth rates are affecting our early grade levels. Now, what I will quickly say is that we kind of see a little bit of a stabilization in those birth rates the last few years. And so definitely something we want to look at of if that starts to stabilize, how that might impact our future and stabilize our future kindergarten and K4 or 4K enrollment. We'll move to the next slide, and we'll keep it here at the early grade levels, and we'll talk about 4K. We know that our 4K and kindergarten enrollment decreased 110 students this year. That's less of a decrease than what we saw last year. But as we touched on a little bit earlier, most of that 4K decrease in enrollment, and hopefully you can see it, that's that kind of light orange yellow line, most of that happened over the last 2 years at our offsite ECE locations. And what we saw this year, this is the inaugural year of offering full day 4K sections. And when we looked at those schools that were offering full day 4K, that's the dark blue line that you see at the bottom, we saw an increase of 15 students. So again, as we look forward, I think that's something that'll be really interesting to see how full day 4K may impact that 4K enrollment. And then one more point here on the last slide. We want to quickly talk about open enrollment, something that can impact our enrollment from year to year. And what we saw this year was that the net effect of open enrollment, when we factor in folks who are using open enrollment to enter the district, as well as students who are open enrolling out of the district, those leavers. So when we can combine those together, the net effect of open enrollment actually was more positive by 101 students. And when we look at that, we were actually nearing our pre-COVID rates. Not quite there, but last year when we saw a negative trend, this year we saw a more positive trend. We had an increase of 8 open enrollment enterers and a decrease of 93 open enrollment leavers. So again, really interesting to see how that might impact our enrollment going forward. We're on that positive trend, so something that we'll want to look at certainly in upcoming years. And so with that, I know you are all probably really excited to hear me say, I'm going to stop talking and make sure that there's room for question and comments. The only thing I want to quickly say is a huge thank you for the time and space to talk about this really great work that our team has done. And just a huge thank you. Bree, Beth, and myself are here, and we're excited to be here, but also a huge call out and thank you to our entire research and innovation team. A lot of hard work as a team and great collaboration went into this. And also the enrollment team did a lot of great work. And also thank you to Dr. Mack or Barb, whoever's rocking the slides, you really appreciate that as well. So we want to make sure again that there's room for questions, and I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for your presentation. This is really important information for us to digest before we go into the next budget cycle. And with that said, I would like to invite board members to ask questions or engage in discussion. seeing any hands, and I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to dive in if other people want to go first, so. My questions. While I was running the slideshow. Up here.
Yes, I can start with a couple of
If
questions.
you'd like to start, that'd be great. Like your questions back open again.
Thank you, Grady, for your presentation. This is always really important and none so more than this year as we're looking towards what enrollment and trying to predict what we're going to see for next year. I guess one of the questions I had when I took a look at the numbers and moving from 2021 to 21-22, what I noticed is that we did have a decline in the number of elementary, like looking at the elementary cohort, the number went down compared to the previous year, and the numbers overall went down. Our middle school numbers, however, jumped much more than they had been the previous year. So from 1920 to 2021, we lost like 31 middle school students. For 21-22, it was 189 difference. And so I'm just curious, I mean, that's a big difference from those 2 different years. Is there any indication as to why that may be happening, or is there a way that we can kind of look at that? And I know you gave us some breakdown of the specific middle schools in the more complex report. I guess you don't even need to answer that if you don't want to, but.
So I'll just quickly kind of provide some initial thoughts. And I think one of the ways to look at these enrollment numbers too, and I encourage folks to do this, is we cluster things absolutely by middle school and high school and elementary school. But when possible, to look diagonally down some of those charts, because some of the incoming 6th grade cohorts just not as big as kind of the outgoing 8th grade cohorts. So it's a great question and something absolutely we can kind of dig down and look into. But that might be one of the reasons, is that we know that there are some larger cohorts that are moving and kind of matriculating through the grade levels, and that might kind of be impacting some of those overall middle school buckets. I don't know if that makes sense, kind of looking, like I said, diagonally. So 8th grade students who left compared to 6th grade students who are coming in, and just the differences in those cohorts. But yeah, it's a great question, and it's certainly something we can look into.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I appreciate you encouraging us to look diagonally. That was sort of my next question, is that I took a look at the kindergarten cohort from that slide 12 that you had, where they started kindergarten in 2017-18, and then followed that through the projection for 5th grade. And what I noticed, and this is not a new trend, I mean, this has been for 5, 6, 7 years that I've noticed this, is that we start out with a cohort in kindergarten, and then it decreases each year that it goes through our school system through 8th grade. And so it's really, I mean, like you said, the declining birth rates is part of this, but it's also watching our cohorts as they move through our schools. And so I would actually like us to try to figure out why that's happening. I know that probably 10 years ago, we did a survey at the district level to try to tease out some of that and figure out what's going on. But I think it's just really important to note. I mean, when you look at the 3rd grade cohort too, starting in 2017-18, those go down too. And noticing, like you did, that from 5th to 6th grade, you know, there was a dip there, and the cohort coming in at 6th grade is smaller. So I don't know if there's a plan to analyze all of that, but I think it's just important to try to best understand as we can the trends that we're seeing. You know, a loss of 1,500 students over 2 years is significant. And I guess as we start this new budget process for 2022-23 in January, I mean, we're going to have to take a pretty close look at staffing and facilities and enrollment to determine how to responsibly manage future budgets. And so the best handle we can get on these numbers, I really appreciate, you know, you explaining to us what has gone into these projections and the assumptions behind them. And yeah, I I'm really interested in trying to piece this out. And then I guess it's more of a comment than a question. So just noticing that trend and just hoping we can, watch that and have another discussion about it, because I really do think that decrease from kindergarten to 8th grade is important. And then just one more thing I noted in slide 7, most of those demographics and cohorts across the years are pretty stable. The one that I noticed that had changed significantly was the number of advanced learners. From 2019-20 to this year, we're down about 1,300 advanced learners. But the number of non-advanced learners stayed pretty much the same. So just curious if we can also tease out why that happened, because that's a really significant drop in numbers of students who are being identified as advanced learners.
Yeah, certainly that's a great question, and something we can work with that department. I think, that's the one demographic where part of that is also an identification process, and it might have been just, impacted during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's a great call out, and certainly one thing that we noticed, and absolutely something we can work with our advanced learning team to kind of get a better context of why that might have shifted. So yeah, it's a great call out.
Thank you.
Chris, for bringing up the need to potentially talk about this in more depth later this year. This is a data-rich and challenging conversation, and as we get more information, I think we might want to revisit this topic. I would bring up a couple of statistics that I think indicate that we can't just blame declining birth rates for declining enrollment in MMSD. And the first one actually came out of the State Journal, and it out of that chart that they had that showed the year-over-year either drop or increase in enrollment for last year and this year. And I noticed in that chart that MMSD was experienced the largest 2-year drop of any school district in Dane County. It was about 5.5%. I think the next highest was Stoughton, which was about 4.5%. And many of our neighboring districts, DeForest, Monona Grove, Mount Hood, Verona, Wanakee, Oregon, have either recovered their lost enrollment due to COVID or actually exceeded it. They've gained students this year despite losing students last year. And I don't think it's much to comment on that, but I think we need to keep in mind that that's not a birth rate issue. That's actually people making choices other than sending their kids to MMSD. And we need to dig into that a little bit more. Try to keep kids here, try to retain kids, or get, maybe even get some enrollment. The other numbers that I was scratching my head over a little bit were in Appendix 5. And I think that appendix said that that 2,731 students ended their enrollment in MMSD between 2021 and 21-22. And I just was we had a year-to-year change of 482 students, which is a lot less than 2,731. And I was wondering if you could explain that difference. I'm confused.
Yeah, absolutely. And happy to provide a little bit more context around that. We work with actually our enrollment team that every cycle going through this, they'll provide us kind of with a head count year to year, and also look at folks who end dated their enrollment in the district. So that number, keep in mind, happens throughout the school year. We get folks who come into the district, we get folks who leave the district. So that's not necessarily tied directly to our third Friday to third Friday count. That's just a way of kind of showing that student mobility throughout the year. And then we provide that table in that appendix, just showing kind of where our students who end their enrollment, the reasoning behind that. So yeah, it's a great call out, and just we try and separate that number a little bit because that's over kind of the span of entire school year, which is normal to see kind of that influx of students coming in and students coming out for a variety of reasons. So yeah, great question. I hope that kind of clarifies a little bit. It's not tied directly to that reduction. It's just showing folks who would have end dated their enrollment before third Friday.
And is that actually the 2,731 a pretty typical number, or is it a higher number due to COVID, or?
That's a really good question. I'd have to look at the overall number. What I will tell you is that when we looked at the percentage breakdown for folks, the students who were leaving the district and kind of the end statuses, it's pretty similar to what we saw last year as well. So it's a great question. We can look at that number and see if that has changed. But what I can tell you is that the percentage of the reasons in the end statuses that we're seeing are pretty consistent with what we've historically seen. So yeah, we can absolutely look at that number for you.
Thanks. And then I just had some questions about class size as well. I noticed in particular that high school and middle school classes in the data we were provided on class size, classes over 29 students are lumped into a 30 to 39 category, whereas all the other categories are broken out in fives. And I was wondering if we could get that 30 to 39 category disaggregated to 30 to 34 and 35 to 39, just so we get a handle on how many kids' classes are actually in that 35 to 39 range. I'm concerned because we have a lot of high school core courses that appear to be above 30 students, and many of them are English classes, which are challenging classes to, you have to put a lot of time into grading and advising students on writing. It's much more time consuming than quickly grading a math test potentially, although math tests take time to grade too. Having 35 to 40 kids in an English class means that those kids probably aren't getting one-on-one attention from their teacher about their writing or how to improve their writing. And that to me raises a big red flag. That said, any core course where you have that many students in high school is also concerning. Likewise, I was concerned about the number of AGR elementary schools that are over the maximum. And we also have quite a few that are under the minimum, which I'm not sure how to interpret that. I know this year we tried to allocate at optimal +1 to decrease the number of classes that fell below the minimum class size. And it just seems to have spread things out more. We actually I think we have more sections above maximum now, although I could be wrong. We shouldn't have AGR class sizes above maximum. That's, particularly for K through 3. It just doesn't lead to good conditions for learning for kids who need more attention and more support. And I'm wondering if, as we move into the budget cycle, like February is when we make our decisions about allocations, and Ross is actually working on workbooks and stuff well before we get into that February conversation. Ross, at this point, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to jump in and talk a little bit about both class size and enrollment and what we're seeing coming down the pike in terms of the state budget, and what we need to talk about in January to prepare for discussions about allocations in February.
Well, I can certainly start that discussion, sure. I mean, it's no secret based on the budget we just approved that we're going into a biennium budget with almost no help from the state. And I certainly do not want to throw cold water on this discussion by giving some preliminary information, because as you mentioned, I'm beginning to work on initial workbook modeling with Dr. Pryor and other members of the administration on where we might need to go and have further discussions for staffing allocations next year. As I look at where we may want to target our class size, it's something that I do want to have further discussions with Dr. Pryor as well as the board on where to go. As far as the class size data that's presented tonight, there's probably no way to fully avoid having some sections above the maximum, below the minimum. I believe I mentioned in one of our previous discussions regarding allocations that, especially in our smaller schools, the difference between 1 and 2 allocations puts you either above or below, and it may be impossible to get you within the class size range if you only have 2 sections of a grade and you have 24 kids. So 24 kids in an AGR school, K3, would put you over maximum, but going to 2 sections would put you under minimum. So it's kind of something that we need to have a long-term discussion on regarding our class size policy, that it does not give a lot of consideration or options when it comes to the smaller buildings we do operate. That being said, we do have a pretty razor-thin margin of revenue to work with next year. It's going to require a considerable amount of reallocation and repurposing of existing funds. I will continue to caution against using one-time funds for allocation decisions, especially as we consider how ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 need to become greater parts of our budget discussion over the next several months. But I will look forward to having some meaningful discussions in January which might be one of our best opportunities to really hit the discussion hard in regards to allocation and decisions we need to make quickly.
Russ, I really appreciate that perspective. And your comment about smaller schools, it can often be very difficult to either come in above the, below the maximum or above the minimum. Makes me wonder if we need to revisit the topic of mixed age classrooms, not as a budget strategy, but as an intentional teaching and learning strategy. And start to look at that seriously, and particularly as we move into a budget year where that kind of a tool may be our best hope for trying to get our class sizes better under control in a very difficult budget situation where we aren't going to have a lot of flexibility to increase our allocations. So I just wanted to put that out there. We've talked about it many times, and possibly this year's budget may be something that inspires us to act. For my comments, Ananda and then Sabian.
Thank you so much, Board Member Carusi, and thank you for your last comment. My daughter had the opportunity to benefit from a 4th, 5th grade instruction at Nuestro Mundo, and also a housing system at Senate before that had gone away, and was such. And she was in 8th grade when those things have changed, and she noticed even at a young age how the loss of students when they were not provided the opportunity to be in a multi-age group. So thank you so much, Board Member Carusi, for highlighting that as a strategy that could address so many things in our district. My question, and thank you so much, Brianne and Grady, for your presentation in such a timely time of our discussion. I am curious how you all, what are you all are seeing when you disaggregate all your data in regards to race and ethnicity, and in particular when we're looking and isolating for English learners, which tend to be immigrants and refugees, given that Madison has been a sanctuary for many immigrants, and given that Wisconsin is it is a community that has welcomed many refugees over the past few decades, and I'm assuming that this influx will continue as different parts of the world are experiencing all sort of different crises. So curious of how you all navigated race and ethnicity, and also an influx of immigrants and refugees in our community.
So just to clarify, in terms of the projection model, or just kind of analysis looking at it for the current year?
Yeah, both. I noticed that some parts of the data had a breakdown and others didn't. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. When we look at the demographics of the school district, I'll just be that all happens in that first section, the analysis of what our school district looks like. We don't inject that into our projection model. Historically, we haven't done that in terms of kind of projecting what we think the demographics of our school district are. We rely kind of on historical trends. So much of what we looked at was kind of just, again, looking at this year compared to last year, compared to previous years, and noting some of those changes. Very stable between the last 2 years, but we do know that there are some changes. And again, there's breakdowns that we looked at across grade level, and a lot of those similar trends across grade level. So I'm not really sure if that answers your question, and I'm sorry if it doesn't, but again, most of that analysis happened when we were looking at actual enrollment.
Yeah, no, thank you. Let me just share maybe a little bit deeper what I was thinking, particular around also low birth rate for white families. Also, 2016, when I worked for the district, I remember doing a data analysis and how our elementary school was a large influx of English learners, Latinx students, And it wasn't, the number of elementary school age students proportionally were larger than our high school, right? For many different reasons, sort of incoming of more immigrant families to our community. Yeah, lots of different reasons so when we look at demographics overall of the district, sometimes we're not really seeing the full picture of what's happening when we isolate elementary school age students and using that as a potential also trend as you're triangulating the data. And I also just want to say I really appreciate the sharpness of looking outside and doing some external research of like what folks in the field are doing to address the issue that everyone is trying to figure out around analyzing the data. So I really appreciate that.
I would just add, Ananda, if we're understanding kind of your line of inquiry correctly, digging a little bit deeper into sort of some of those intersections of demographics, looking at ELL and various race ethnic groups is something that we could certainly add to our list of follow-up.
Yeah, I think that in particular, because we're looking at, we're thinking that there are programs and interventions that we need to take into account that looks different at the elementary level than in the high school level. If we're looking at the trans as, students that are having the same needs, that's one way to look at it, right? Like, so it's kind of like a homogeneous group. And I know this is our best guess, but when we're looking at, there is some complexities to what we're saying. We're likely to see a larger influx of English learners in the next few years, which that's my theory. I do look at analysis of data across the state now. And what we are seeing is, lower rates of enrollment for white students just overall, higher rates for, in particular, elementary school of students of color, higher rates of English learners all over the state, and also schools that were predominantly white students are now also in decline all over the state. So I think a lot about those things, Rianne. So I was curious how you all were navigating, and I'm really happy for any follow-up. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ananda. Sabian?
Thank you so much for the compilation of this data and the presentation. I don't have any questions for you all because the data is the data. I will say that this conversation about enrollment is a heavy conversation with large backdrops of white flight, of segregation, and of what families we cater to as a school district. And so while many can make an inference about why we're quote unquote losing students and some other districts are quote unquote gaining students, I think it's critical that we work to serve the students in front of us, and that we continue to uplift and center the students that have been historically marginalized in our system, and the trend of trying to cater to the most wealthy and privileged in our city and really center those who have been left behind historically as we continue these conversations and undergo strategies that quote unquote attract families to Madison.
Thanks, Sabian. Are there any additional questions or comments before we wrap this up? Seeing none, Brianna and Grady, thank you so much. And Ross, thanks for jumping in and providing some context about the budget. I appreciate all of you and have a good evening. And on that note, we have reached the end of our agenda. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second. Sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and safe travels.
Have a good night.